Family spots deceased dad in last place they ever expected. While everyone copes with their grief differently, we all come to know a similar pain, the terrible dreams, the reoccurring memories. For one Australian family, though, the grieving process was taking its toll after the family patriarch, a father of two, disappeared without a trace. Over a decade later, however, a strange sight sent them on a search for answers that even the authorities warned was completely hopeless. Russell Jenkins appeared to be building the perfect life. He and his wife Sandy had a comfortable home in the suburbs of Werribee, about 20 miles from Melbourne, Australia. There they had even more going for them. The couple also had two sons, Ethan and Charlie, who were born 2 years apart. The four of them formed a stereotypical nuclear family, but one evening something shattered their tranquility. On that evening, Russell and Sandy got into an argument. It seemed like no big deal. Every couple is bound to disagree sometimes, right? Well, this fight would go on to change the family forever. With tensions and frustrations escalating between the two adults, Sandy took her two sons to another part of the house to defuse the situation. Russell stayed behind, clearing his head by watching sports on television. Meanwhile, Sandy and the boys watched a movie to calm down, and the night slowly returned to normal. But around 9:15 p.m., she heard a rumble coming from outside the house. This wasn't a predator in the bushes. This was a sound she knew well. It was Russell's Toyota Yaris starting up and pulling out of the driveway. He hadn't told anyone he was leaving, but Sandy figured it was possible he was mad and wanted to get away for a moment. Of course, he'd be back soon. But the night came and went, and Russell never returned. That was completely unlike him, as he'd never stayed out late like that before. Still, it was a total surprise when, the next morning, some officers knocked on Sandy's door. Russell's car, the officers said, was found at the Lara Australian Rules football ground about 18 miles from the house. To make matters worse, the car wasn't exactly empty. All of Russell's possessions were still in the car. Wherever he was, which still was uncertain, he was traveling without his keys, money, or anything beyond the clothes on his back. At this point, Sandy knew she had to do something. She started searching for any sign of her husband, from knocking on doors and speaking with neighbors to designing the distributing flyers. Sandy did everything in her power to find even the smallest clue. Despite her efforts, nothing ever turned up. Over the years, the lack of knowledge took a toll on the family. They couldn't bear the lack of closure. Desperate for peace, Sandy mulled over a difficult decision. Eventually, she and her sons relocated to New South Wales, roughly 600 miles away from the home they shared with Russell. There, things continued as normal until the family took a trip to Queensland's Sunshine Coast. One afternoon, the three pulled into the Caloundra Stockland Mall and headed inside. After an ordinary shopping trip, they headed into the parking lot, where they saw a figure in sunglasses watching them from across the parking lot. The lone man was coming towards us, casual-like, Sandy told the Sydney Morning Herald. But the encounter didn't end after he passed by. There was something unsettling about this person. Sandy observed him, and to her surprise, he kept looking back at the family. He ended up watching us just as much as we were watching him, she said. Then he took his sunglasses off, and everything changed. When Sandy looked into the man's eyes, she was sure it was Russell. The man she hadn't seen in nearly a decade was now within arm's length. All of her efforts, every phone call and flyer, had led up to this moment. But Sandy couldn't bring herself to confront Russell. She was too numbed by the moment to do anything but look on in shock. The family drove away, but they would cross paths with him again, sooner than anyone thought. On the way out of the area, the family got caught up in traffic. By chance, they pulled up alongside the man again. Sandy noticed he was with a woman and driving a utility vehicle, but they began moving again before she could catch his license plate number. Once at home, Ethan became skeptical that a strange man in a parking lot could be his missing dad. While most of the family's old photos were lost in a flood, he began poring over any information he could find. he soon came to an unshakable conclusion. Despite the man being older and heavier than the photos, Ethan was convinced that his mother was correct. That strange man was Russell. They had found him and simply let him drive away. What could they do now? The family went to the police asking for help once more, but authorities said their options were limited. Disappearing simply isn't a crime. All they could do was amplify the family's plea for Russell to simply confirm he was okay. Although most would consider this story bizarre, it's far from the only instance of unexplainable disappearances.